Well, we were down at the border on Friday with the vice president. There was a lot of people from the media down there following him because he was talking about border security. We're going to talk about that coming up. But we asked him the question about Joy Behar because that was an issue you all really cared about and wrote us at the end of the week last week. Joy Behar said because he prays to God and because God speaks to him, like he does many of you, that Joy Behar said he had a mental illness because God speaks to him and he hears from God. So we asked him what he thought about that. Listen. Joy Behar made a comment saying that leads her to believe that you have mental problems because God speaks to you. Is it hypocrisy that liberals, Democrats, mainstream media, they preach tolerance, but yet when someone wants to be a Christian and says that God speaks to them, they have a problem with that?
Those of us in public life are pretty accustomed to criticism. But when I heard that ABC had a program that likened my Christianity to mental illness, I just couldn't be silent. My Christian faith is probably the most important thing in my life. I do try and start every day reading the Bible. My wife and I try and have a prayer together before I leave the house every morning. But I do think I'm a very typical American. I think people of all different faith traditions cherish their faith in God, and to have ABC have a forum that spoke in such demeaning terms, I think it's evidence of how out of touch some in the mainstream media are with the faith and values of the American people.
He went on to say, he just said, you know, and when you're in public life, which y'all know this, y'all been working on this show for 20 years, people say things. They say things, they criticize constantly. He said you get used to that. But when someone's criticizing God and your faith, that is so important to the people that he represents, to most Americans, to most people around the world, no matter what your faith is, no matter what your belief is, then he has to stand up and he has to say something.
I think it's unbelievable that Oprah, that almost the next day said, well, I was going to run for president, but I thought if God wanted me to, he would have said something. Really? So is Oprah Winfrey also mentally ill?
Joy Behar later said she was just kidding.
No, but she said, well, but I give money to the church, which is the most ridiculous comeback ever. Oh, so I wrote a check to the church so I can put down Mike Pence.
She's a comedian, not funny.
Troublemaker. What did you do to Joy Behar on MSNBC? So tell them what's up.
Well, I heard about it. I didn't see it. And let me just say, look, criticism comes with this job. It's part of the job.
But just tell them the gist of what she said.
Well, I actually heard that ABC has a program that compared my Christianity to mental illness. And I'd like to laugh about it, but I really can't. I mean, Mike, I'm a believer. Like tens of millions of Americans today will have ash on their foreheads to mark the beginning of Lent. Overwhelming majority of Americans cherish their faith. And we have all different types of faith in this country. But I have to tell you, to have ABC maintain a broadcast forum that compared Christianity to mental illness is just wrong. And it's an insult not to me, but to the vast majority of the American people who, like me, cherish their faith. I mean, my Christianity is the most important thing in my life. I try and start every day by opening the good book. My wife and I try and have a prayer together before I leave every morning. I can honestly tell you my faith sustains me in all that I do. And it's just a regular part of our lives. But I'm not unusual. I think I'm a very typical American. Whatever your faith tradition, people understand that. But I just think it demonstrates how out of touch some in the mainstream media are with the faith and values of the American people, that you could have a major network like ABC permit a forum for invective against religion like that. And I call them out on it, not because of what was said about me, but it's just simply wrong for ABC to have a television program that expresses that kind of religious intolerance. And we're better than that. Our country's better than that. And you're better than that. And I'd like to be light about it, but I really can't. Not for my sake, but for the tens of millions of Americans who cherish their faith. I can't be silent.
When I talk about the Democrats being at a complete disconnect with the American people, nowhere is this more obvious than when it comes to disdain for religion. So yesterday on The View, Joy Behar, who is just an insufferable human being, Joy, have me on your show, right? I know that's a hell of a pitch. You're insufferable. Have me on your show, but nonetheless, The View, I think they are probably a little afraid to have me on that show, which I would be too if I were their producers. In any case, Joy Behar goes after Mike Pence yesterday in the most disgusting terms about his religious observance.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's different.
That's different. That's called mental illness, if I'm not correct.
But
I'm hearing voices.
Okay, so just to be straight about how the left views religious people, if you say that you heard the voice of God, okay, what you mean usually, okay, let me just explain on behalf of religious people everywhere. When you say that you got a message from God, you don't actually mean that God sent you an email. Okay, it's not Bruce Almighty. This is not God picks up the phone and calls you. It's not Joan of Arc. You're hearing actual godly voices. What you get is a feeling that perhaps you're acting in consonance with your meaning in the universe. Okay, that you're acting in consonance with what God wants of you as you can decipher it in his word. Okay, that's what we mean as religious people. We don't mean that we're sitting around and Jesus starts talking to us. Say, ha, this is Jesus. Okay, that's not what we mean. Mike Pence, I don't know why he has a southern accent either, but the idea that Mike Pence is sitting around in the VP office waiting for Jesus to give him orders is insipid. I will also point out that Joy Behar would be the first person to say that men who say they are women do not have a mental illness. So if you're a man and you say you're a woman, you're not mentally ill. If you're a woman and you say you're a man, you're not mentally ill. But if you're a religious person and you say that you are trying to believe according to the dictates of Jesus and that you feel that you've gotten messages from Christ in your life, that this means that you're a full-on nutso. It's that sort of disdain for religion that is driving millions of people in the United States away from people like Joy Behar. It's not just Joy Behar. One of the people who's been most irritating about the Olympics is an ice skater named Adam Rippon. He's gay, which wouldn't make a difference, except he has made this the entirety of his identity. And when I say, I mean, like, he's made it his entire public persona. Not that he's a great ice skater, which apparently he is, but that he is gay and that he hates Mike Pence. So he apparently was ripping on Pence for being at the Olympics in the first place, suggesting that Mike Pence was for gay conversion therapy. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. This is not true. There is no evidence to support it whatsoever. Doesn't matter. He trotted that out. And then when Pence said, you know what? That's not true about me. I'd love to sit down with you. Rippon said, I'll never meet with you. So obviously a very tolerant dude. Well, yesterday he came out and he says, listen, I don't want my Olympic experience to be about Mike Pence. So let's get this straight. You punch Mike Pence in the face rhetorically, and then you run screaming from the room. And then you say you don't want your Olympic experience to be about Mike Pence because you've implied that religious people all over the United States hate gay folks. And here is Adam Rippon doing the same routine.
And I don't want my Olympic experience to be about Mike Pence.
Well, it's a little late for that. It's a little late for that. You rip Mike Pence as a religious bigot. And then you come out and you say, well, I don't want my Olympic experience to be like that. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to rip Mike Pence as a religious bigot, and by extension, all of the people in America who are evangelical Christians as religious bigots. It's not just that, okay? The culture wars that the left launched brought them Trump. Okay? When I say this is how you got Trump, this is how you got Trump. You got a bunch of people in America who feel like they are constantly being set upon and torn to shreds for simply being religious people or simply being white, right, in some cases, based on the intersectional politics of the left, or simply for being in a Midwestern state. Right? There are all these groups that the left has seen as great oppressors in American life, white folks, males, religious people. And then the left sets upon those people, and those people say, well, you know what? I'm going to vote for that guy who at least doesn't crap on me all the time. But this is what the Democratic Party does. This is what people on the left do on a routine basis. You want to reach out to folks, you want to win elections, then maybe you ought to stop trying to alienate them with incredibly radical language. And maybe you ought to stop with the fawning media coverage for social issues that are at best deeply controversial.